The other thing you do is you address energy. So this is a solar install at my house. My house is behind here. I have a 2.2 kilowatt solar panel that powers my house. That's what I got. It's over there by the lake. It's a training we had. You do solar thermal and solar photovoltaics, and you're able to have far better opportunity to have more control over your energy economy if you relocalize it. This is wind at my community. That is my grandson, Giwaden Bakanaga. You saw my two grandchildren at the end of that other video. Two of them. This is Giwaden. He's 3. I just want to point out he is outside of the yellow tape. I didn't realize when I took that picture how bad that looked. But his mother lets me take him still. Okay. This is a 82-foot tower and a lowland turbine going up on it. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is a couple things. I'm interested in community wind. I'm interested in sizing equipment to your community at an appropriate scale. This is the size you need to operate for a school. I have my organization, the White Land Recovery Project, and also the Native Harvest. We sell a lot of wild rice. So what we have is we have a former elementary school. 2003, Callaway Elementary wins the No Child Left Behind Award. 2004, they put in $1.2 million in renovations. In 2005, they closed the school because it's a rural school, right? That's what they do. And in 2006, they sell us the school for $250,000. There you go. There's America. So anyway, we have a school. In that school, we have a USDA-certified food production facility where we process that wild rice, we package it, and you can buy all our stuff online. It's called Native Harvest. And we also produce for schools on the reservation, right? We have a farm-to-school program. We have daycare, we have offices, and we have a radio station, right? That's a certain amount of power that is required for all those facilities. And that is the size you need, is this. The other thing I want to point out is that this is being put up by a veteran. And the reason I say that is that the United States has a lot of veterans. We have a lot of unemployed veterans. We have a lot of people who could transition from a military economy into a green economy, because a lot of the skill set is appropriate. Because I myself am not the person that is going to sit in between those two large pieces of metal, right? Or climate, right? But this guy who was in the special forces, that's the kind of thing that guy does, right? No problem. He's like, oh yeah, I do that. And in terms of the Native community, it turns out that Native people have the highest rate of enlistment and the highest rate of living veterans of any community in the United States. And so because of that, you might want to figure out something for your veterans to do. And renewable energy is one of the answers. So here's your big Ojibwe word of the day. It's, can you guys say this? Inashke?
Inashke.
Very good. That means ta-da! It's just what you say after you put up your wind turbine. This is what I was talking about in terms of energy waste. Between point of origin and point of consumption, Lawrence Livermore Lab says 57% of the electricity energy is wasted. So people often say that renewable energy will not meet present demand. My response would be, why would you want to meet present demand? It would be just like pouring a bunch of stuff down a hole. It makes no sense. You need to have efficiency at every level. You need to have local, so you're not transporting it halfway around. And then you need to have some things that are scaled appropriately, right? And this is how you do that correctly. This is the Danish model, which until a couple years ago was leading in wind energy. The Danes are not a particularly left-leaning country. They aren't like scary people or anything. They're just like the Germans, who 1/3 of their power is from renewables. They're just handy, smart people. In this case, if you look at this chart, I know this is entirely geeky, but the point is that how you get a lot of wind turbines up that make people happy is that 58% of them are owned by the families, and 23% of them are owned by co-ops. In other words, the vast majority, which I think is like 81% are owned either by the people who live there or a co-op. They aren't owned by corporations and utilities. That's what you call power for the people. So I guess the point of this is to say, look, I just talked about how you go down that path that is not scorched. None of this is like creating anything new. This is all technology and an elegant, set of systems that are local controlled. And if you build from the local level, you change your system, basically how it works. And it is really, really important to recognize that this is not something that is solved by someone someplace else. This is solved by people like us who do these things. And then people like us who have to often, quite obviously, battle ignorance at federal and state levels, right? But a lot of these are things that we do. Now, just a couple more slides. This is the big picture of what we're looking at. And, my smart friend up there, he could fix this slide for me. How many of you know the organization 350.org? Very good. Thank you. This is slides from 350. Actually, Bill McKibben and I were classmates. He might have been slightly more geeky than I am, but we are neck and neck. And neither of us knows how to size a slide. But the first number, this is 3 numbers that you need to remember. First number is 2 degrees. That's what that says. You can kind of get that from the slide, right? Using your imagination, it's a little abstract, but it says 2 degrees, right? But the point of this is that what you do not want to do is increase the temperature over 2 degrees. If you get into an over 2 degree temperature increase, you start getting into some really bad feedback loops, right? On the climate and a lot more climate chaos. This is all a very, very bad idea, the increase in climate chaos. So this is what you want, is the 2 degrees. You want to keep it below. This is your second number, which is how much CO2 you can combust to stay below the 2 degrees. 565 gigatons. That's really a lot. I have no idea how much that is, except for it's really a lot, okay? What I tell you is that, the tar sands have 240 gigatons in the tar sands. Right? That's why the tar sands is a problem. Some is less extreme, and some is not as high in CO2. The tar sands just happens to be the top in the CO2, right? And we've only extracted 3% of the tar sands. So we have a decent shot if we can keep the rest of it kind of in the ground. That's why it's such a flashpoint, right? This 565 gigatons. And then this is the problem we have, which is that this 2,795 gigatons of CO2 is the amount of carbon that is held on the books of multinational corporations. These are the reserves of Exxon, of Syncrude, of BP, of Peabody Coal, of Rio Tinto Zinc, right? This is what they hold and own as reserves, and they are still exploring. This is your problem. And so, as some of you heard, and as I talked at the beginning, so I'm an economist by training. But what Harvard Business School will tell you is that Harvard Business School and probably most universities will tell you that that is an asset. And I will say that that is actually a liability. And so it is some deconstructing that is essential of their paradigm and what it is we're looking at. Because, we are all in pretty much the same canoe. That's the number we don't want out there, right? None of us can do that. And so the challenge is we also all drank the same Kool-Aid. I went to the same schools as all of you, right? And I know what they teach in the schools, and they still teach that in the schools. So until we begin to actually, challenge that and quit drinking the Kool-Aid, we're going to have a lot of problems. And so this is what I know even they're discussing here on this campus, divestment. And the reason that we need divestment is because there's plenty of good things to invest in. The reality is that local food systems, local food marketing, renewable energy is robbed of investment by fossil fuels. The economy we want is robbed by fossil fuels because energy is the biggest business in the world. So it's really, really important that it's not like sticking your money in a sock under your pillow. It's like take your money and put it someplace where it's going to make a difference. So that's why that is a really important battle. This is what renewable looks like. That reservation Fort Berthold, which is entirely fracked right now, and they're fracking more of it, has 17,000 times more wind energy potential than they could use. That's in the middle of the Bakken. So what if they exported wind and not fracked oil, right? It turns out that Indian reservations are the windiest place in the country. Go figure that out. I don't know how that worked out. And I'm really sorry that the people from Intertribal Council on Utility Policy and the US DOE didn't put Michigan on the map because you got plenty of wind, right? So someone can fix this and then send me the new map. And send it sized correctly. This is a project I worked on the Navajo Reservation, Dene Solar. This is what it looks like when you do it. I'm not the smartest girl, but I raised some money, worked with some people who leveraged some capital from pollution credits, and we solarized a new tribal building, right? That's what you can do. This is me and my friend Jill. She looks very tough. I have three of these. I'm not getting any Christmas cards from Enbridge this year. But that's okay. This is what you don't want. That's a Mi'kmaq woman facing the cops. And none of us could ever forget that picture. You know? That's what you don't want. We don't want to be facing that many cops when they come into our land to protect a fracking. This is what you do want. This is, so I have 3 biological children and 3 adopted children. I couldn't have produced all those children that it was announced that I had. They're really close in age. Each of my children had a best friend who moved in. So this is my 2 now 13-year-old boys. This is my Irish intern who is over in Ireland right now, because you should always have 1 Irish intern. And these are 2 Navajos that are sitting there on a boat, and I wish I could say it's biodiesel powered. It's not, but it's in the middle of Leech Lake. And the reason I have this slide up is that I was asked a few years ago to present at this World Economics Conference. And it was, 43 countries, and they were all talking about economics. And basically the discussion is that in the US, we predicate a lot of our success on GNP. And GNP counts things like number of guns we sell, number of prisons, number of hospital beds, amount we spend on medication, right? Amount of riot gear. Things that are not actually making us feel better, right? So I was hanging out with these 2 countries. I was hanging out with a lot of cool people. I got to hang out with Bhutan for a while. They have the Gross National Happiness Index. I was thinking that's pretty cool. Then I was hanging out with Vanuatu and Costa Rica, happiest countries in the world for many years. I actually got to go to Vanuatu a few years ago, and I see why they're so happy. They're a Melanesian island in the middle of the Pacific. I go down there, and they're Melanesian island. That's pretty good to start with, right? And they're like all perfect. They have like this perfect Melanesian hair, this like froze that are out to here. They're like perfect teeth and perfect skin. Nobody was fat. And they were, hanging out, and we went up to this village, and, went way up in this village, and I took my 11-year-old son with me, and there was a lot of clothes on. And little kids, very little in the clothing department. And so the 11-year-old son was horrified. He's like, Mom, Mom. I said, that's your problem, not theirs. Totally true. It was like, that was his problem. They're all fine. So it took him about 10 minutes, and he's out playing soccer with a bunch of like kids with no clothes on. He was fine. You know, just took him a minute. He's like, oh, we're cool. You know, and then we, you know, hung out, and then, you know, like the little boys would wear their pretty much like little baskets over their privates, or like penis sheets or something. You know, that's the extent of the outfit that the little boys were wearing, right? And so my kid was like horrified. But I was like, you know, whatever. And so then, what I was really laughing at is, so they're up there and they're eating coconut milk, which is like, you know, everyone's happy when they eat coconut milk, right? They had like all local food, and they, you know, in this one, they had 85% local food in that whole set of, you know, area. That whole area had 85% local food, and they even had like they had a brewery, and their brewery made this beer, and you know what they did is they just refilled their bottles. They didn't go like crush them, send them off someplace, make new bottles. That's like an inefficient materials economy, right? That's how we're all messed up, is we've got this like whole set of system that's so inefficient. But they were all so happy. I totally got it. And then it was made me laugh. It's like when they went to town, they put on some clothes, they put on a t-shirt, and they put on these sarongs. And like 70% of those sarongs were like Bob Marley sarongs. So very happy. There was no like, you know, Prince or anything. It was like Bob Marley. Anyway. The reason I'm saying this is that I threw down the gauntlet at this conference. I said, we're going to be really happy. We're going to go neck and neck with you guys on happiness. Give me like 10 years. You know, but that's the point, is it's like, you know, is that it is, you know, in their valuation of it, they said what they valued was their relationships. If they had access to their land, if they had access to good food, if they had security, if their children were healthy, if they had good health care, if their women felt safe, you know, if their elders were part of their community and were not ostracized. And I was thinking, like, that's our indicators, right? That's what we want. And it had nothing to do with money. You know, and so to me it was like a really powerful experience to reflect on that. And I think that's a lot of what we need to do some rethinking on. Because it turns out that money can't buy you love. You know, and shopping malls don't make you happy. But these other things do. You know, and so it is this question of re-indexing. And so Vanuatu unfortunately lost their crown of happiness to Costa Rica a couple years ago. Costa Rica doesn't even have a military. I don't know if you know that. But I said, Vanuatu, what happened to you? And they said, faulty data. So they're back re-indexing and just doing it. But anyway, so I just point that out. This is my last slide. If you want to know more about us, I spent the afternoon working on our website. Honor the Earth is our organization. You know, I want to thank you, and I want to say I got one. I'm just going to show you what my community looks like, if I can figure out where it is. I mean, I can figure out where my community is, but... They're making wild rice here on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. It's a time when the Anishinaabe take to the lakes with our ricing poles, our canoes, our bawaганик, our ricing sticks. And it is a time our families gather to harvest our most sacred of foods, Winona. Winona are wild rice, the food that grows on the waters. That we were instructed in our migration story to go to the place where the food grows on the waters. It's our most sacred food, first food eaten by a young person, a baby, and usually the last food served to the elderly is served at our feasts and ceremonies. Where there is wild rice and Winona, there are Anishinaabe people. We take to those lakes and rivers and we pole through to collect our wild rice. It's hard work, what our people are doing, but we're very, very proud as Anishinaabe people of being the people of the wild rice that we can feed our families, feed our bellies, and feed our souls as our sacred food. We're also the people who are able to make a living for our families through our wild rice. Our community fought long and hard to stop the genetic engineering of wild rice, and has also worked to try to keep some of this wild rice and the value added in our communities. As large corporations took our wild rice, domesticated it, and now 95% of the wild rice that is marketed in the United States is coming from diked rice paddies in Northern California. We don't call it wild rice, we call it tame rice. It doesn't taste like a lake. It doesn't smell like a lake. This is our people coming in, we're proud this time of year. Our families are able to eat. and we're able to bring some money home for our communities and for the winter. This is our native harvest wild rice being purchased at Lakeside. This is on one of our trailers, and we were good. We paid the best price out there for the rice so that people could get the best money for that hard work they had. Families going home with hundreds of dollars for a day's work, which really makes a difference in our community. And they're proud. A lot of these people, young men, this is something they're really, really proud to do to continue their traditions. Our rice comes into our rice mill here on the reservation. This time we're hauling it in our horse trailer. Sometimes we use the big trailers, but sometimes we use a horse trailer when that's what we have. And we're happy to be able to offer our wild rice here. We're going to be parching this rice for our families, our community, and for our customers. Thank you for joining us. Miigwech.